One thing I've always wondered in sports is given the same circumstances, how often does a player succeed? What I mean is drafted at the same position, therefore getting the same amount of opportunity, how often is someone to succeed? And contrary to them not. To figure this out, I built this. I know it's a bit of an eyesore, but it'll start to make sense. On the left is the logos. Each diamond represents one player each season for the last 50 seasons. And to add a little fun, I'm going to give you one player in each sport, and I want you to try to guess what the chart is about. The first player will be this one. Joe Burrow, drafted first overall out of LSU back in 2020, has had a complicated career to this point. Before getting drafted first overall, Joe Burrow would win the Natty with LSU on what is arguably the greatest collegiate team of all time. Joe Burrow's rookie year was not bad by any means, but the rest of the Bengals were terrible, posting a 4-11-1 record. The very next year, Joe Burrow would elevate his game, not only bringing the Bengals to the playoffs, but eventually the Super Bowl against the Los Angeles Rams. Unfortunately for Burrow and the Bengals, they would eventually lose it to those same Rams. Joe Burrow since then has been a great quarterback, even getting an MVP finalist just a year ago, but he has not had the chance to sniff glory again. With that, we have the first player. Now let's go to the NBA. LeBron James is a player that needs no introduction. Basically has done everything possible in the NBA. Of the 22 seasons LeBron has played in the NBA, he has got MVP votes in all but 2 of them, winning it 4 times. Along with the 4 MVPs, LeBron won Rookie of the Year and has won 4 championships, 2 with Miami, 1 with Cleveland, and 1 with the Lakers. And with that, we're on to the next sport, being the NHL. Despite being drafted only 10 years ago, Connor McDavid has already cemented himself as one of the greatest hockey players of all time. Over his first 9 full seasons in the NHL, he's won 5 Art Rosses, 3 Harts, 4 Ted Lindsays, 1 Rocket Richard Trophy, and 1 Conn Smythe. Of all these trophies, this one is the most interesting. The Conn Smythe is the playoff MVP, but what is interesting is McDavid won it without winning the cup. As of right now, McDavid is the greatest loser in NHL history. He's lost back-to-back cups and most recently a gold medal. With that, all we have left is the MLB. Despite only being drafted 3 years ago, Paul Skeens is already one of the best pitchers in the majors. Like Joe Burrow winning the Natty with LSU, Paul Skeens was viewed as the next big thing. And Paul Skeens did not disappoint, instantly winning Rookie of the Year and then a year later winning the Cy Young. Just like Burrow, on the team front he has had no luck. The Pittsburgh Pirates are awful. With that, we have the final player of our 4. Now back to the chart. This is where we'll find Burrow, LeBron, McDavid, and Skeens. What do all these players have in common? I guess I gave it away at the start. What I mean is drafted at the same position. Now that the cat's out of the bag, let's get to what this video is actually about. This green symbol is for any player that played the equivalent of a full season throughout their career in any sport, whether it being 82, 162, or 17. While I talk, I'll change them over, but the vast majority of the players will be in this green tier or higher. Of the last 200 first overall picks, minus the last couple drafts, only 4 players have failed to play a full season in their sport, all of which coming from the MLB. These players are Brian Taylor, Brian Bullington, Mark Apel, and Brady Aiken. Of the 4 players, only 2 actually played a game in the majors, being Brian Bullington and Mark Apel, playing a combined 32 games, split 26 for Bullington and 6 for Apel. After struggling in the minors, Apel did retire in 2018 and came back in 2022 to play the only games of his career. For Bullington, he never really was great at the major level, posting a 1-9 record. However, when he left to Japan, he carved out a really solid career. As for Taylor and Aiken, they both suffered multiple injuries that ultimately derailed their career. Quick couple of facts about Taylor is the injury he suffered was in a bar fight, and in 2012 he was sentenced to 38 months in jail for peddling drugs. There are other first overall picks that never made it on screen now, but they were outside the time frame. Alright, now we're back to the chart, and there is something I need to address. This will be more apparent now, but the recent first overall picks obviously have not been able to have the same career so far. For example, Cooper Flagg and Matthew Schaefer have not even been able to play a full season yet. No doubt will they both have incredible careers, but I'm not going to include projections in this video. With that out of the way, I know it's a bit of a jump, but we're going to go all the way to people who've won rings in their league. There is a reason for this big jump that I'll bring up later. And with a snap of a finger, this is what it looks like updated. I ended up using red because the gold kind of blended in a bit. But nonetheless, the red represents every single first overall pick that's won a chip. Minus this 6-year run in the NHL, getting first overall rarely ensures that you win a championship. If your favorite team is picking first overall in the NHL, you have a 32% chance at winning the cup. In the NBA, 30%. In the MLB, a 26% chance of getting a chip. And in the NFL, just a 22% chance. The earlier mentioned 6-year run kind of exemplifies why this is so hard. Among these 6 players, there's 13 rings. Half a championship win comes down to the management, and if your management isn't good, you'll never win. While if you get drafted to a great team with great management, you might win multiple times. For every player that wins multiple championships, it indirectly blocks other players from winning one. Now, with that out of the way, the 1983 NFL first overall pick, John Elway, had a very interesting career. Drafted first overall at Stanford to the Baltimore Colts, John Elway was the best quarterback in the class, nicknamed the quarterback class of 1983. Something to note is he was also drafted in the second round in the MLB, also out of Stanford, and to the Yankees. Right after the draft, Elway would refuse to play for the Colts, joining a small list of players that went first overall that would refuse to play for the team that drafted them, among those being Eric Lindros, Eli Manning, and Bo Jackson. Elway would threaten the Colts organization, saying that he would join the Yankees full-time if he was not traded. The situation got so crazy that Hall of Famer Terry Bradshaw denounced him, stating you should play baseball, he's not the type of guy you win championships with. They even would float the idea of trying to trade him to the Niners for Joe Montana. Elway would get his wish and eventually would get traded to the Broncos. Unfortunately for Elway, for a while, that quote by Bradshaw would be true, as he would lose in the Super Bowl in '86, '87, and in '89. Over the next 8 years, Elway would cement himself as one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. However, it would take 8 years for him to make his next Super Bowl appearance in 1997. Fortunately for Elway and the Broncos, he would lead them to winning the first chip in franchise history. And the very next year, Elway and the Broncos would run it back to win their second championship together, on what would be Elway's last year of his career. This video is sponsored by me. If you're enjoying so far, a like and subscribe truly means the world. Thank you, and enjoy. Now with that out of the way, before we move on to the next tier, there's one more story I want to talk about. There's a player that's been drafted first overall twice. In the NHL, NBA, and NFL, there's rules to combat you from going into the draft again. However, in the MLB, you can choose to not sign and then go into the draft again after your collegiate career. Previously mentioned Brady Aiken is among these players, but he was drafted 17th after re-entering the draft. The only player to ever get drafted first overall twice not only had a great mustache, but was named Danny Goodwin. Goodwin was drafted in 1971 first overall by the White Sox and in 1975 by the Angels, both outside of our time frame. For being the only first overall pick ever picked twice, you expect him to be incredible, right? No, he wasn't. He only posted 13 home runs and has the worst WAR by a first overall pick that made the majors in MLB history. Whew. Now with that out of the way, we're on to the next tier, which will be award winners. This blue will represent any award winner, and earlier I said, with that out of the way, I know it's a bit of a jump, but we're gonna go all the way to people who've won rings in their league. There is a reason for this big jump that I'll bring up later. I guess it's time to bring it up. Winning a championship no doubt is the bigger achievement, but sometimes players will be a passenger on that team. Winning an award shows more individual brilliance. Alright, now let's do some animation or something. That's good enough. As you can see, there's much more award winners than championship winners, which isn't necessarily surprising. For example, in the MLB, obviously there's just one champion, but there's position awards for best hitting and best fielding, obviously MVPs, World Series MVPs, certain playoff MVPs, it's insane. Time to finally get into the odds. What are the odds a first overall pick wins an award? If you are picked first overall in the NBA, you have a 50% chance at winning an award, in the NHL 46%, and in the MLB and NFL a 40% chance. If we compare winning an award to winning a championship in every sport is almost double, showing how hard it is to win a chip. The most recent award winner in the NBA, NHL, and MLB all come from the 2023 draft, one of which we've already talked about. Those 3 players are Connor Bedard, Victor Wembanyama, and Paul Skeens, all of which winning Rookie of the Year. On top of winning Rookie of the Year, all 3 of them have been called generational talents. And for Paul Skeens, he's already won a Cy Young for Pitcher of the Year. If we overlap the layers one more time, we'll see some of the greatest players of all time to never win a championship. one of which falling here in the 1997 NHL draft. Jumbo Joe Thornton was picked first overall by the Boston Bruins. In his rookie year, he had one of the worst rookie years from a first overall pick in NHL history, only putting up 7 points in 55 games. After his rookie year, he would steadily get more and more points, ultimately boiling over in the 2002-2003 season. Not only would he be named the captain prior to the season, he would put up 101 points. The very next season, he would face slight regression after having surgery on his right cheekbone after getting in a fight with the previously mentioned Eric Lindros. In 2005, the NHL would have a lockout where Joe Thornton would go to Switzerland for a little bit. The very next year, he would get traded to the San Jose Sharks, where his production would explode. Between the two teams that year, Thornton would put up 125 points, the most points since Jagr in 1999, taking home the Hart Trophy for league MVP and the Art Ross for most points. Thornton and the Sharks would have no playoff success for the first decade of their relationship together, up until 2016, where they would make the finals versus Sidney Crosby's Pittsburgh Penguins. Unfortunately for San Jose and Joe Thornton, they would lose the cup to Crosby. Despite jumping between teams at the end of Thornton's career, he would never make the finals again, ultimately becoming one of the greatest NHL players to never win a championship. Now with Joe Thornton's story out of the way, we're on to the next tier, which will be represented by this pink and will be Hall of Famers. This is where we'll really cut down the remaining crop. My gosh, am I running out of animations to convert the two, but here we are. As we can see, drafting first overall and getting a Hall of Famer is dime a dozen. For what will be the second to last time we're playing the numbers game. If you're drafted first overall to the NBA, you have a 24% chance at making the Hall, the NHL and NFL 14%, and the MLB just an 8% chance. For the second consecutive time looking individually, the NBA is a bit of an outlier here, which isn't very shocking, considering there's only 5 people on a team on the court at once. If we go back to the original chart and overlap them slowly, there's one player that'll be an outlier to everyone else, the only Hall of Famer in the last 50 years to make the Hall without winning a chip or an award. This player, of course, being the 2002 first overall pick, Yao Ming. Drafted to the 28 and 54 Houston Rockets, he would instantly propel them to 43 and 39, narrowly missing out on playoff ball. He also would finish second for Rookie of the Year behind Amari Stoudemire. Yao Ming would be an all-star in every single season of his career, but that's where the problem comes in. His career was only 8 seasons long. Yao Ming suffered from every injury under the sun, likely due to him being tied for the second tallest player in NBA history behind two names I'd rather not pronounce. Yao only got the privilege to play playoff ball 4 times, and since it's Houston since 1995, they didn't win. On stats alone, Yao might not make the Hall, but his influence in Asia in the basketball scene is immeasurable. To close off this section about Yao, there's something I read that I've never seen before. The earliest Yao could have made the Hall of Fame was 2012, but Yao felt it was too soon and requested that the Hall of Fame delayed it, which they would accept to 2016. With that out of the way, before we move on to the fifth and final tier of our pyramid, there's one more group of players I want to talk about. That being the biggest busts of the last 50 years. When finding the biggest bust in the MLB, it's pretty cut and dry between the two players who never played a game, that being Brady Aiken and Brian Taylor. You really can't go wrong. But for me, Brian Taylor does take the crown here. Not only was he throwing up to 99 miles per hour in 1991, he was also dubbed by a scout saying he would have been one of the greatest pitchers in the history of baseball. Now moving on to the NHL, it's really a two-horse race between Nail Yakupov and Alexander Dag. Quite frankly, Dag was the better player, and we will be talking about Yakupov, but there's a quote from Dag that I just couldn't leave off. I'm glad I got drafted first because no one remembers number 2. Who was number 2, you ask? Hockey Hall of Famer Chris Pronger. Going back to Yakupov, he was the headliner of what is maybe the worst draft in NHL history. Of the top 5 overall picks, 4 of them are retired. Mind you, this was 2012. Yakupov's draft interview was so bad, it sparked the legendary GM Brian Burke to say this.
The worst interview, and I think he's a good kid. I think this was an aberration, was Nail Yakupov.
He also said this.
And then John Lilly, one of our scouts, I thought was going to hit him. When he refused to answer a question, I asked him because he didn't like the question. So,
as you can tell, right off the bat, he already had issues, but for whatever reason, the Edmonton Oilers saw through it. He actually had a pretty good rookie season, putting up 31 points in 48 games. The NHL had a half season lockout, so that's why it's a bit shortened. After his rookie year, his point totals consistently went down, which isn't shocking. He didn't really have much of a work ethic, and the Edmonton Oilers during that time were a clown organization. Moving on to the NBA, we're going to talk about a player I mentioned very shortly at the intro, being Anthony Bennett. Drafted first overall out of UNLV to the Cavs, he was kind of seen as a shock pick. He was projected to go high, but not necessarily first. Looking back at mock drafts from 2013, he was projected to go 6th or 7th, behind the likes of Otto Porter Jr. and Victor Oladipo. The scouts that ranked him lower, quite frankly, correct. He never has averaged more than 5 points in a season and retired at the age of 23. That being from the NBA, that is. He's been on quite the world tour since his retirement, playing in Turkey, America again, Taiwan, Israel, and most recently in Bahrain. And with that, we're on to the final sport, being the NFL. And like the NBA, it's pretty comfortably one person, being Jamarcus Russell. Drafted out of LSU in 2007, he was drafted in front of two Hall of Famers, being Calvin Johnson and Joe Thomas. Over the first 3 years of his career, he was pretty brutal, but the rest of Oakland was equally as bad, so he kinda got away with it. But going into 2010, he would face an interesting controversy. He would show up to camp 20 pounds overweight. Despite chances of being able to get the number one quarterback spot back, he would never play a game again. Now, with the most notable busts out of the way, we're finally on to the last tier, that being the greatest of all time. Before we start putting them on the chart, we need to define who is the greatest of all time in their sport. As to stay neutral, I'm not going to be giving my opinions. Instead, I'll give options and then you can decide who you think the GOAT is. Of the four leagues, only two of them have a widely agreed upon GOAT, that being the NHL and the NFL. For the NFL, there's no argument about it not being Tom Brady right now. 7 rings in his 22-year-long career, 3 MVPs, second in MVP at the age of 44. What is there not to know about Brady? On screen now is every single record not team related that Brady holds. The number 69 records. Nice. There is a chance, albeit a small one, by the end of Patrick Mahomes' career, he'll be in that conversation as well. But with his ACL tear last season, it's pretty bleak. Tom Brady famously was drafted in the 6th round, therefore, we are 0 for 1 in our current GOATs. Now, moving on to the NHL, where we'll find the great one, Wayne Gretzky. Besides some people, funny enough, me included, Gretzky is the most widely agreed upon GOAT in the four big sports. Gretzky has almost 1,000 more points than the guy in second, being the previously mentioned Jaromir Jagr. Gretzky was such a big deal that in 1988, when he was traded from the Edmonton Oilers to the Los Angeles Kings, it instantly started the rapid expansion of the NHL in the United States. Shortly after the Gretzky trade in 1991, the San Jose Sharks would be founded, then in 92, Tampa Bay, in 93, Florida and Anaheim, in 98, Nashville, just to name a few. Without Gretzky getting traded, the NHL would look vastly different, and who am I to speculate? What I can say is Gretzky, unlike your average player, went undrafted for a very bizarre reason. In 1979, Gretzky would still be on the Oilers, but in a rival league called the WHA, which would fold that very year. Instead of the players from the WHA getting drafted into the NHL, some teams would just come on over, including Gretzky's Oilers. No doubt with Gretzky's junior stats would he have been drafted first overall, but because of the merger, evidently he wasn't, meaning we're now 0 for 2 with our GOATs being first overall picks. However, that's about to change, with the age-old question, LeBron or Jordan? If I'm being honest, I could make a 30-minute long video on this, but I'll try to keep it brief. With Jordan, you have the legendary double three-peat, but the equally as legendary double retirement. The first three-peat from 1990 to 1993 was just dominance from Jordan, finals MVP in all of them, and then the very next year, in 94, he would retire for the first time. Jordan would retire to pursue a career in baseball, later saying that the murder of his father 3 months prior helped him shape his decision. Unsurprisingly, Jordan wasn't very good at baseball. He posted an OPS south of 600 in Double A. After his 1 year in baseball, he would retire and come back to the NBA saying 2 words, "I'm back." While it would take a year, he really was back. The second three-peat would happen from 95 to 98, where he would win all the finals MVPs and 2 other MVPs during that time. After the three-peat, of course, staying on brand, he would retire again, this time for 3 years. Seemingly at the time, Jordan did intend for this to be his final retirement. He said, and I quote, 99.9% certain he would never play another NBA game. 2 years later in 2001, Jordan would return to the NBA playing for the Washington Wizards, where he would pledge his salary to the September 11 victims. Michael Jordan only came out of retirement because his friend, hockey great Mario Lemieux, 1 year prior did it after being diagnosed with cancer and retiring for 3 years. He would only spend 2 years with the Wizards before, for the third and final time, retiring for good. Jordan was not a first overall pick. In fact, he was drafted third, meaning we're now 0 for 3. Moving on to LeBron. In recent years, LeBron has got closer and closer to taking the throne away from Jordan. Judging by accolades alone, Jordan trumps LeBron in almost everything. 5 to 4 MVPs, 6 to 4 championships, but LeBron's longevity is undeniable. Of all the players to ever play an NBA game, LeBron has played against 35% of them. Any record that refers to longevity, say your most points of all time, LeBron pretty much has all of them. At their peaks, albeit slightly, Jordan was better than LeBron, but given the fact he retired a couple times, LeBron's longevity to some people does carry him higher than Jordan. LeBron was drafted first overall to his hometown team, the Cavaliers, meaning we are now 1 for 4 with our GOATs being first overall picks. The MLB is by far the hardest league to pick a GOAT in. If you ask a random person on the street who they think the GOAT of the MLB is, odds are they'll say Babe Ruth. And understandably so, when looking statistically at the greatest player of all time, slugging and OPS, Babe Ruth possesses both of them, WAR he's the highest, and he also pitched at an extremely high level. However, there are some things working against him here. He's only a one-time MVP winner due to the MLB having a bizarre rule that before 1928 you could only win one. More importantly, the end of his career predates the end of World War II by a decade. In 1947, shortly after World War II ended, dark-skinned individuals were allowed to play in the MLB for the first time after Jackie Robinson debuted for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Why this is significant is during Babe Ruth's career, a lot of the best individuals in baseball happened to be those dark-skinned players that were playing in a separate league. Therefore, he was doing all this in a league that wasn't up to standard. This should go without saying, but the end of Babe Ruth's career predates the MLB draft by 30 years. Therefore, he was never a first overall pick, and we dropped to 1 and 5. Rapid firing through the next one here, Willie Mays basically did what Babe Ruth did, but to a slightly worse level, but after the merger. This should go without saying, but Mays was not drafted. 1 for 6. Now moving on to the first player that could have been drafted and was drafted, the greatest hitter of all time, Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds has 3 more MVPs than the guy in second, being Shohei Ohtani, with 7. Barry Bonds in his early years was utterly incredible, don't get me wrong, but nothing the sport has never seen before. However, somewhere between 1998 and 2000, he would start taking roids. Basically like any baseball player at the time. Shortly after taking roids, it would coincide with the greatest 4-year run in baseball history. Barry Bonds over those 4 years hit 209 homers, including the single season record at 73. For some people, and understandably so, being on roids kind of disqualifies you from being able to be the greatest of all time. But Barry Bonds was also never a Hall of Famer and never won a championship. As a matter of fact, he was a playoff choker. Barry Bonds is among those players that were drafted twice. First in 1982 by the Giants in the second round, then in 85 by the Pirates, 6th overall, meaning we are now 1 for 7. And finally, we're on to the last player, who will be Shohei Ohtani. Unless you've been living under a rock the last few years, Shohei Ohtani's been going crazy. Since 2021, he's won 4 MVPs and of course the back-to-back World Series in 24 and 25, all while being the first player to efficiently pitch and bat since Babe Ruth almost 100 years prior. Ohtani is so good that he's created a club that he is the only person in, being stealing 50 bags in a year and hitting 50 home runs. There is only one thing working against Ohtani in the GOAT debate, and that's he's only 31. He needs to be consistent for another decade to accumulate GOAT status stats. Since Ohtani was an import from Japan, he was never drafted. 1 for 8. And finally on the chart, the GOAT will be shown by this little crown. Wow, welcome to the end of the video. Thank you so much for making it this far. If you enjoyed, a like and subscribe would be great. It truly means the world to me. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day. The rest of this video will be completely off script. I'm so happy this is done. It took ages. I had a great time doing it. I just want to give a shout out to one of my friends that's very close to me. I promised him almost a year ago that I would finish this video. At times, I never thought I would, if I'm being totally honest. He nagged me occasionally to get it done, and that's the only reason this is actually coming out today, which I'm so grateful for. As much as it feels great for me to click upload, I want it to be more a gift to that person. Thank you, bro. It means the world to me. I love you. And to anyone else that has made it this far, seriously, it does mean the world, and thank you.